Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission today is to take the name we all know, Dr. Seuss, and peel back the thick layer of green eggs and ham to find the surprisingly complex, often politically charged, and truly contradictory human being underneath, Theodor Seuss Geisel.
It's really necessary to do this deep exploration because, well, the public memory has kind of softened the edges of his career, hasn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Geisel wasn't just a super successful children's author. He was, an illustrator, an Oscar-winning documentary filmmaker even, and a genuine political firebrand who used his art to, well, wage war on fascism and consumerism.
It's incredible. We're talking about a literary giant. His books sold over 600 million copies, translated into more than 20 languages.
And our source materials, they reveal these multiple identities, sometimes, in sharp conflict with one another.
Oh, okay, let's unpack this right from the beginning then, because even that iconic name, Dr. Seuss, it's built on, rebellion and maybe a little bit of deception. It doesn't come from some whimsical moment.
No, not at all. It actually comes from a college scandal during Prohibition, of all things.
Right, at Dartmouth.
Exactly. When Geisel was an undergraduate there, he got caught drinking gin in his room with 9 friends. Since alcohol was totally illegal during Prohibition, the punishment was pretty swift and severe.
What happened?
The dean forced him to resign from all his extracurriculars, and that included his really cherished position as editor-in-chief of the Jack-O-Lantern, the campus humor magazine.
Wow. That must have felt like a huge professional blow for a young, ambitious artist like him.
Oh, absolutely devastating, I imagine. But instead of just quitting, he found a loophole, didn't he?
He did.
He was just driven, to keep contributing to the magazine. It was his main creative outlet back then. So to get around the administration's ban, he just adopted a new signature, a secret pen name.
Which was?
Seuss. Just Seuss. It was basically an act of defiance, right? Continuing his creative work right under their noses, but with a mask on.
And what's really fascinating here is the pronunciation. Most of us, growing up in the States, we say Seuss rhymes with loose.
Right.
But the family history, it tells a very different story about his middle name.
That's a key detail in the source material, yeah. The Geisel family, they were of German descent, raised Missouri Synod Lutheran, and they pronounced Seuss as Zeus.
Zeus, rhyming with voice.
Exactly, yeah. And there's evidence from his college days that his friends, his collaborators, they knew about this German pronunciation.
Huh. So why did he make the switch later on to the Seuss that we all use today? It seems kind of odd to change your family's history just for a book cover.
Well, it was pure branding. He admitted it pretty openly, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he decided that the anglicized pronunciation Seuss was just much more advantageous for a children's author. He felt it evoked a figure advantageous for an author of children's books to be associated with Mother Goose.
Ah, okay. That makes sense. Like an instant connection to fairy tales.
Exactly. It established that immediate sonic connection,
That's some clever market positioning right there. Now, what about the doctor part? He did spend time in England, right? At Oxford.
He did, yeah. Lincoln College, Oxford. He was there intending to earn a DPhil, which is a Doctor of Philosophy in English Literature. In the British system, that often involves a lot of independent research.
But he didn't finish it.
No, he left Oxford without actually getting that degree. So he added the doctor title, not because he earned it academically, but more as a kind of long-running, affectionate joke.
An homage, I guess, to his father's wishes.
Precisely, yeah. His father had always kind of harbored hopes that young Ted would practice medicine. So by calling himself Dr. Seuss, Geisel could pursue his drawing and poetry while, giving a sort of tongue-in-cheek nod to his father's professional dreams for him.
So right off the bat, we established that the identity we connect with all this harmless, whimsy Dr. Seuss, it was actually founded on a Prohibition-era violation, a rebranded pronunciation, and an honorary self-applied medical degree. It definitely signals right away that this deep dive is going to reveal a man constantly navigating these kinds of contradictions.
It absolutely does. The listener should really understand that the man behind the Cat in the Hat was constantly shifting roles. He proved himself to be an extremely shrewd businessman in advertising, a really focused political activist, and a literary revolutionary. It's quite a mix.
Okay, let's move into his early career then, which kind of surprisingly was bankrolled not by children's rhymes, but by, well, the relentless pursuit of killing bugs.
Laughs. Yeah, that's pretty much it. After leaving Oxford and coming back to the U.S. in 1927, he started submitting work everywhere. He got his foot in the door selling his first nationally published cartoon for like $25 to the Saturday Evening Post.
Not bad for a start.
No. And that led him to New York and a job at the Humor magazine judge.
And that move to judge is where his career took this really unexpected turn into advertising gold, right?
Totally unexpected. In early 1928, he published this cartoon that just happened to mention Flit, which was a specific brand of insect spray made by Standard Oil of New Jersey.
And the story around how he got hired is kind of legendary. Something about an executive's wife at the hairdresser's.
That's how Geisel often told it, yeah. And whether it's totally true or slightly embellished, it led to this huge career shift for him. An advertising executive's wife supposedly saw the cartoon at her beauty parlor and, urged her husband to hire this young illustrator.
Wow.
And that one introduction, it established this professional relationship that basically provided Geisel's financial backbone for the next 13 years.
13 years. And the Flit campaign became absolutely everywhere. It generated that catchphrase that just permeated American popular culture.
Oh, yeah. The Flit campaign, it ran sporadically until 1941, and it was a massive cultural hit. It spawned the catchphrase, "Quick Henry the Flit."
I've heard of that.
Yeah. The sources detail just how pervasive it was. It became shorthand for pretty much any emergency. It's a running gag in movies, a punchline for major comedians of the era, like Fred Allen and Jack Benny. Geisel's drawings were funny, surreal, and instantly recognizable.
It's kind of staggering to think he was financially dependent on a literal bug spray ad, not fiction, for over a decade.
It really is.
How did that advertising background end up impacting his drawing style later on, do you think?
Well, the income provided financial freedom, right? A real safety net. The source material notes that the money from Flit actually made him wealthier than most of his Dartmouth classmates.
Wow.
So this wealth let him pursue his creative interests without the constant pressure of needing a quick paycheck. He and his first wife, Helen Palmer, they traveled extensively, visited like 30 countries by 1936.
Nice.
But maybe more critically, the ads forced him to communicate complex ideas and situations visually and, importantly, economically. And that's really the cornerstone of his later picture book success.
That makes sense. It's amazing how the wealth from, a commercial ad bought him the freedom to fail repeatedly on his real passion, children's books.
Exactly.
Speaking of which, let's talk about the rough birth of his first book, and to think that I saw it on Mulberry Street.
Yeah, the inspiration was pure rhythm, apparently. In 1936, he was coming back from Europe on an ocean liner, and the just persistent rhythm of the ship's engines sparked the poem that became the book.
But getting it published, that was a real struggle, a heroic struggle almost. Most people probably don't realize that.
Oh, a huge struggle. The accounts vary a bit, but the manuscript was rejected by an astonishing number, somewhere between 20 and 43 publishers.
43. That's enough to make anyone question their career choice, let alone a beginner.
Absolutely. It really speaks volumes about the resistance he faced with his unique style back then. He was reportedly walking home, actually carrying the manuscript, and fully prepared to destroy it, like burn it out of sheer frustration.
Oh my gosh.
But then fate intervened.
He literally bumped into a Dartmouth classmate on the street.
Yes, Mike McClintock. And it turned out McClintock had just become an editor at Vanguard Press.
Yeah.
So that chance encounter, literally on a street corner, meant McClintock read the book and published it in 1937.
Incredible.
If Geisel had decided to walk down a different block or, burn the manuscript 10 minutes earlier, the entire history of children's literature could be dramatically different.
So he finally gets his literary career started, but then he almost immediately pivots away from that whimsy towards polemics as World War II erupts. He takes a complete break from children's literature.
He did. He made a very conscious political decision to step away. From 1941 to 1943, Geisel devoted himself entirely to political cartooning for the New York City newspaper, PM.
And PM was significant, right?
Very significant. It was known for its left-leaning, fiercely liberal perspective.
Right.
And crucially, it refused to accept advertising. That gave its editorial staff, including Geisel, complete freedom in their polemical content. He drew over 400 cartoons in just 2 years.
400. And his targets were the obvious external threats, like Hitler and Mussolini denouncing fascism.
Right.
But he also dedicated a significant amount of his firepower to internal American politics.
He really did. He saw U.S. isolationism as this catastrophic threat. So he frequently drew cartoons attacking prominent isolationists, people like Charles Lindbergh, often depicting them as kind of complicit with the Nazis.
Wow.
He also sharply criticized Congress, particularly the Republican Party at the time, for questioning aid to the Soviet Union or just for their general resistance to preparing for the war effort. He argued this disunity was inadvertently helping the Axis powers.
This period really illustrates the extreme political contradictions that seem to exist within Geisel's legacy.
It's probably the most complex part of this whole deep dive, because on one hand, he was this vocal advocate against prejudice, right?
Yeah.
Drawing powerful cartoons that deplored racism directed at Jewish Americans and Black Americans. He felt that domestic prejudice harmed the overall morale and unity needed for the war effort. Yet on the other hand, he created this, well, notorious cartoon that strongly supported the internment of Japanese Americans. It showed them lining up, waiting for TNT, suggesting they were all potential saboteurs.
That is a stark, almost painful complexity to grapple with today. A man fighting for racial justice on one front while endorsing systemic injustice on another.
It really shows the fever pitch of wartime paranoia,
Hmm?
I think, and maybe the difficulty of maintaining consistent ethics under that kind of intense pressure.
Right.
By 1943, he transitioned from political cartoons to actual army service, joining as a captain.
And this move basically took his propaganda work and gave it an official structure within the government.
Pretty much, he was put in command of the animation department of the 1st Motion Picture Unit of the Army Air Forces. And here, he used his illustrative talents to create films for the war effort. He helped develop the Private Snafu training series.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of those. Weren't they kind of risque?
They were short, comedic, sometimes pretty crass cartoons, designed specifically for adult soldiers. But he also wrote serious documentary films, including Your Job in Germany and Our Job in Japan.
And the latter one, Our Job in Japan, actually won him cinematic acclaim, didn't it? An Oscar.
Yes, exactly. His work on Japanese culture and post-war planning was expanded into a commercially released film called Design for Death in 1947. And it went on to win the Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature Film.
Think about that. The man who would eventually write The Cat in the Hat has an Oscar sitting on a shelf for a documentary about post-war policy. It's just incredible. Okay, so after the war, Geisel and his first wife, Helen, they move out to La Jolla, California. He starts publishing with Random House, gets back into children's books. But what's really fascinating is that the Geisel we know today, the sort of literary revolutionary, he was born not just from his decision to return to writing, but from a national crisis in education.
Exactly. Here's where the context of the 1950s is so crucial. In 1954, Life magazine published this blistering report basically arguing that American school kids were struggling with literacy. And why? Because their early reading material, exemplified by those monotonous Dick and Jane books.
Oh, yeah, Dick and Jane, run, Spot, run.
Right. They were just too tedious. The books lacked creativity. They lacked engaging visuals. They were just profoundly boring.
So the education system was identified as being fundamentally dull. And William Ellsworth Spaulding, who was the director of the education division at Houghton Mifflin, he saw Geisel as the potential antidote.
He did. Spaulding knew Geisel had the whimsy, the drawing power. But he needed to prove Geisel could make that magic work within really strict constraints.
Right.
So he challenged Geisel with this incredible mandate.
Which was?
Take a comprehensive list of 348 keywords deemed essential for first-grade readers, cut it down to 250, and write an entire book using only those words. His famous instruction was apparently, bring back a book children can't put down.
Wow. That is the ultimate example of constrained creativity, isn't it? Geisel, the guy who flourished when faced with the constraint of a prohibition ban, was now faced with a vocabulary ban.
Exactly.
And the result was just revolutionary.
It totally was. 9 months later, Geisel delivered The Cat in the Hat. And get this, he used only 236 words from that list.
Incredible.
The genius of the book was its perfect fusion.
Yeah.
Right? It offered the chaotic imagination, the energetic verse, the unique drawings that kids absolutely loved. But it made it accessible to beginning readers, kids who were previously stuck reading material that had, the vocabulary of a grocery list and the excitement of watching paint dry.
Wow, sorry.
Yeah.
The success was instantaneous, massive. It led directly to the launch of beginner books, and it permanently shifted how children learn to read pretty much across the globe.
Oh, the sales metrics just confirm the endurance of this breakthrough era. This period gave us classics like Horton Hears a Who in 1955, How the Grinch Stole Christmas in 57, and Green Eggs and Ham in 1960.
Oh.
And even decades later, the commercial power is just staggering. In 2009, for instance, Green Eggs and Ham sold 540,000 copies. The Cat in the Hat sold 452,000. One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish sold 409,000 copies.
In 1 year.
In 1 year. These books, by an author who died years earlier, were routinely outselling the vast majority of newly published children's books on the market. It's amazing.
His legacy just became so large that he actually had to invent other literary identities just to manage his output. He didn't just write as Dr. Seuss, did he?
That's right, yeah. When Geisel was only writing the text for a book and another illustrator was handling the artwork, he adopted the pen name Theo Lessig.
Seed. That's Geisel spelled backward.
Bingo.
Right.
He used this for titles like 10 Apples Up on Top, which came out in 1961. It allowed him to diversify his output without, compromising the specific Dr. Seuss's brand, which was so intrinsically tied to his unique illustration style.
Clever. And there was a third name, too, wasn't there? Connected to his second wife, Audrey.
Yes. He also used the name Rosetta Stone for one collaboration in 1975. The book was pretty shly because a little bug went ka-choo.
Rosetta Stone.
Yeah. He chose that name as a tribute and an honor to his second wife, Audrey Stone Diamond. It shows how his personal connections were often sort of subtly woven into his professional identities.
It's probably important context to mention the personal changes during this incredibly productive period, too. His first wife, Helen Palmer, who was so instrumental in his early career, she tragically died by suicide in 1967 after struggling with health issues.
A very sad part of the story.
And then Geisel married Audrey Stone Diamond in 1968, and she really became the chief protector and advocate of his literary estate after his death.
A crucial detail, absolutely.
Yeah.
And despite dedicating his entire professional life to entertaining children, Geisel famously had none of his own. He often joked, "You have them, I'll entertain them."
Right.
Audrey later confirmed that this was simply his preference. She said he lived his whole life without children, and he was very happy without children. Interesting footnote to such a child-focused career.
Okay. Moving now to the heart of his genius, maybe. The subversive moralist. Geisel himself said he never started writing with a moral. He insisted that kids can see a moral coming a mile off and they dag at it.
Laughs. Yeah, he had a way with words. Yet, almost in the same breath, he would concede that there is an inherent moral in any story. And, maybe more revealingly, he once remarked that he was subversive as hell.
Laughs.
His political convictions, he was a lifelong liberal Democrat, were definitely injected directly into his post-war children's books. He used that whimsy as like a brightly colored Trojan horse for social critique.
Let's review some of those political themes, because this is where the former political cartoonist really comes back into play, doesn't it?
Absolutely. You see environmentalism and clear anti-consumerism in the Lorax from 1971. That book starkly illustrates the dangers of unchecked industrial greed through the Once-Lar character.
Right, who cuts down all the beautiful truffula trees for profit.
Exactly, until the entire landscape is devastated and polluted, leaving only that tiny vital seed for hope at the end. It was a really searing critique of American corporate resource exploitation at the time.
And he tackled huge social issues like prejudice and racial equality with the Sneetches in 1961.
Oh, that's a masterstroke. The Sneetches is this brilliant allegory about the absurdity of superficial prejudice. You have the Sneetches with stars on their bellies who think they're superior to the ones without. Then this cunning salesman, Sylvester McMonkey McBean, arrives and just exploits their vanity. He sells machines to put stars on, take stars off, reverse the process, all for profit. Until nobody can even remember who started out with what.
Goofs.
The core message is just powerful and clear. Differentiating people based on superficial traits is foolish and expensive, and it only feeds the merchants of conflict.
He also took on totalitarianism and the Cold War arms race.
Oh, absolutely. Yertle the Turtle from 1958 is a really powerful, unambiguous allegory against authoritarianism. Yertle, the king of the pond, demands more and more power, stacking his subjects up into this massive throne.
Just stacking turtles on top of each other.
Yeah, demanding that you remain silent despite the suffering of the turtles underneath. It's widely seen as a commentary on the egotism and boundless demands of figures like Adolf Hitler.
And how does it end?
The rebellion only happens when the small turtle at the very bottom, Mac, simply burps. And that tiny act causes the massive, fragile structure of centralized power to just collapse.
Wow, a burp brings down the dictator.
Pretty much. And then the escalating arms race got the full Seuss treatment in 1984 with the Butter Battle book.
Right, that came out during a really tense period of the Cold War.
Exactly. Height of renewed tensions. It details this ridiculous conflict between the Ukes, who eat their bread butter side up, and the Zooks, who eat it butter side down.
That's the whole conflict.
That's the whole conflict. And the two sides keep developing increasingly absurd and destructive weaponry, culminating in this mutual threat of annihilation with these tiny, powerful bombs. It was a clear, vivid message against mutually assured destruction, but brought down to the level of, childhood nonsense.
What's really moving, though, is his political evolution on the specific issue of Japanese Americans. We noted his wartime support for internment,
Right, that difficult cartoon.
but post-war, his views clearly shifted.
His change of heart is beautifully evident in Horton Hears a Who, which came out in 1954. This book, with its famous line about respecting small voices, a person's a person no matter how small, it's often viewed as an allegory for the American post-war occupation of Japan.
Ah.
Geisel had apparently deeply regretted his earlier hostility toward the Japanese people. And to demonstrate this reversal, he dedicated the book to a Japanese friend, Iwao Takamoto, sort of symbolizing his personal atonement and a new global perspective.
That's powerful. And he didn't stop targeting contemporary American politics later in life either. He got directly involved in the Watergate scandal, didn't he?
He certainly did. During the height of the Watergate hearings between 72 and 74, he took a copy of his own children's book, Marvin K. Mooney, Will You Please Go Now? And he converted it into this direct political demand. He just replaced the main character's name with that of the sitting president.
So it became Richard M. Nixon, Will You Please Go Now?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was published in major newspapers, thanks to his friend, the columnist Art Buchwald, who helped get it out there. It's a perfect illustration of how Geisel saw his format as a tool for immediate, recognizable political messaging.
However, that very accessibility led to one of the most contested interpretations of his work, right? That famous line, a person's a person, no matter how small, from Horton Hears a Who. It's been widely adopted and used by the pro-life movement.
Yes, it has.
And Geisel, and later his estate, firmly objected to this usage. They viewed it as a clear misinterpretation, didn't they?
They did. Vehemently. Geisel himself had even threatened to sue an anti-abortion group back in the 1980s for using the phrase on their stationery.
Wow.
And later, his widow, Audrey, through her attorney, stated explicitly that she did not like people hijacking Dr. Seuss characters or material to front their own points of view. It became this significant legal and ethical struggle for the estate.
Especially since Audrey herself later gave financial support to Planned Parenthood, which further complicates the issue of ideological ownership over the text.
Exactly. It highlights the difficulty of controlling interpretation once a work enters the public sphere.
Finally, we have to address the evolution of his legacy in the modern era, specifically the decision made back in 2021 regarding several of his titles.
Yes. In 2021, Dr. Seuss Enterprises, which is the entity that manages his intellectual property now, they announced, actually on what would have been Geisel's 117th birthday, March 2nd, that they would cease publication and licensing of 6 specific titles.
And this decision was rooted in academic and cultural critiques about outdated and, frankly, offensive imagery in those books.
It's correct. The 6 books, which included his very first one, and to think that I saw it on Mulberry Street, and also, if I ran the zoo, they are pulled because the company acknowledged, quote, they portray people in ways that are hurtful and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
This decision, which was informed by scholarly analysis, reflected a commitment from the estate to ensure that the Seuss catalog represents and supports all communities and families, end quote. It shows that even a legacy as massive as Seuss's is constantly being reevaluated and adjusted in the modern cultural context.
That whole discussion shows the complexity of the message, definitely. But now let's maybe shift to the mechanics of his art, his poetic style and his really distinct visual aesthetics. There's actually a deeply technical, almost scientific reason why his verses are so catchy and readable, isn't there?
There is. The secret sauce, technically speaking, is his primary poetic meter. It's called anapestic tetrameter.
Okay, break that down for us. Sounds complicated.
It sounds academic, but let's just think about the sound. Anapestic means 2 unstressed syllables followed by a stressed syllable. Okay, da-da-diem.
Da-da-diem.
And tetrameter just means there are 4 of these feet, these da-da-diem units per line.
So it creates that galloping, energetic rhythm we really associate with, like the Cat in the Hat.
Precisely. Listen to the rhythm. The sun did not shine, it was too wet to play. That da-da-da-dum just pulls the reader along at this really infectious pace.
Yeah, you can feel it.
It's cited as a core reason for the wide reception of his work. It's almost primal in its rhythm, like a strong musical beat. It makes it really difficult to read his text slowly.
It provides a huge contrast to the simple iambic or trochaic tetrameter you often find in standard, traditional nursery rhymes.
Yeah, exactly. Now, for books that were constrained by the absolute smallest vocabularies, like green eggs and ham or one fish, two fish, he would sometimes simplify the meter to match the simpler words, using maybe 2-beat feet. But that anapestic meter really remains his signature sound.
And this technical mastery with words was paired with a visual style that evolved quite significantly from his early pre-war advertising work.
Oh, the shift is remarkable.
Hmm.
His early work, including those flit ads and the political cartoons, often used shaded textures, pencil drawings, watercolors. But the iconic post-war children's books, they shifted to a much starker medium, pen and ink.
Right. Very graphic.
Very graphic. Typically, he limited himself to just black, white, and maybe one or two additional colors. That gave the illustrations that classic, punchy quality. Later books, like the Lorax, used more color, sure, but the defining style was those stark lines and getting maximum impact.
I am always struck by the surreal nature of his landscapes and architecture. I've read that one of his key rules was essentially no straight lines.
That is the defining artistic hallmark, and it's so critical to understanding his visual world, his figures. You know, the Grinch, the cat, they're rounded, often kind of droopy.
Yeah.
But look at his buildings and machinery. Almost all were drawn without any straight lines, even when he was representing real objects. If you look at the illustrations in that, if I ran the circus, you'll see the hoisting crane is drawn with this visible droop. The steam calliope looks like it's made of soft clay.
Laughs.
Yeah.
This refusal of right angles creates a world that feels really fluid, maybe slightly out of control, and just perpetually fantastic.
Everything feels like it's in motion, too. And he had specific visual techniques for conveying action, borrowing lessons from traditional cartooning, right?
Absolutely. He was a master of conveying movement and emotion through specific physical gestures. One gesture he seemed fond of was what you might call the voila gesture. The hand flips outward, fingers spread, often with the thumb up, like he's presenting something magical.
Oh.
This does this when he creates a fish and one fish, two fish. He also frequently drew hands with interlocked fingers, often sort of twiddling their thumbs, which communicates nervousness or maybe contemplation.
Interesting detail.
And he also used traditional comic strip lines, not just to indicate speed and action, but to illustrate abstract senses like smell, sight, or hearing, even thought, like those jagged lines surrounding the Grinch's head when he conceives his terrible, awful plan. This unique half-century contribution to literature and art eventually garnered him considerable recognition towards the end of his life.
It did. In 1984, he received the ultimate literary accolade, a Pulitzer Prize special citation. It was for his half-century contribution to the education and enjoyment of America's children and their parents.
That's fantastic.
He also won 2 Primetime Emmy Awards for his television specials. Halloween is Grinch Night, and The Grinch is the Cat in the Hat.
And his birthday, March 2nd, is now nationally recognized, which really underscores his cultural impact.
Yes, it's observed as National Read Across America Day, and his posthumous honors are substantial as well. The University of California, San Diego's library was renamed the Geisel Library in 1995.
Right.
And the Dartmouth Medical School was renamed the Audrey and Theodor Geisel School of Medicine in 2012, recognizing the couple's extensive support for education and literacy.
Finally, let's just touch on his complicated adaptation history. He was initially very protective of his characters, wasn't he?
Extremely reluctant. He was really hesitant to market his characters outside the books, mainly fearing loss of control over how they were portrayed. He only gradually relaxed that policy over time.
What was the turning point?
The key breakthrough was allowing his old friend and wartime colleague, the brilliant cartoon artist Chuck Jones, to create the animated version of How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Back in 1966.
Ah, the classic.
The absolute classic became an annual holiday tradition and really a hallmark of that era.
But his only foray into feature-length films during his lifetime was, well, kind of a traumatic experience for him.
It's a painful one, yeah.
Yeah.
The film was called The 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T, released in 1953. It was a critical and financial failure, and Geisel was apparently deeply unhappy with the whole production process and the final result.
So he swore off movies after that.
He never attempted another feature film while he was alive, which helps explain his later reluctance to just hand over his creations to Hollywood.
And after his death, his widow, Audrey, became the fierce guardian of his visual legacy.
She absolutely did. She approved the live-action Jim Carrey Grinch film, which was a huge financial success.
Right.
But she was famously and very publicly critical of the 2003 Mike Myers Cat in the Hat adaptation. She felt it fundamentally distorted the spirit of the work.
And that criticism led to a pretty firm line on future adaptations, didn't it?
It did. Audrey stated quite clearly she would not allow any further live-action adaptations of Geisel's books. Full stop.
Wow.
This protective stance ensured that while animated films like the 2008 Horton Hears a Who and the 2018 The Grinch continued, The visual integrity of his distinct, fluid world was maintained and protected against, live-action Hollywood intrusion. Even in places like theme parks, the architecture is specifically designed with no straight lines, honoring that core aesthetic. So as we sort of conclude this deep dive into the source material, the central contradiction of Theodor Seuss Geisel becomes almost impossible to ignore, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does.
He was, a professional adult who made his living composing comedic jingles for bug spray ads, yet he evolved into this radical political poet who used the simplicity of the children's format to attack fascism, consumerism, prejudice, the whimsy, the rhythm, that unique drawing style we all love. It really served as a brilliant camouflage for these profound, passionate political arguments. And many of them are as relevant today as they were 60 years ago.
It's that constant dynamic, isn't it? Between the careful, money-making professional and the deeply subversive artist that makes his life story so compelling. And if you look closely at his career arc, you see this strange pattern emerge.
What's that?
His two most pivotal professional breakthroughs, the creation of his signature brand, Dr. Seuss, and the launch of the beginner books empire with Cat and Hat, both came directly from unexpected professional constraints or personal setbacks.
That's a really powerful connection to make, yeah. His college punishment for drinking gin during Prohibition forced him to adopt that secret pen name, Seuss, which created the whole identity.
Right. And later, the educational crisis led a publisher to impose that incredibly strict, limited vocabulary list, the ultimate creative constraint. And out of that highly restricted environment came The Cat in the Hat, the literary work that really secured his global legacy. So we're kind of left to consider the unexpected power of constrained creativity. What crucial piece of work in your own life might emerge if you were faced with unexpected professional constraints, forced to work within limits, or had to overcome what seemed like a setback? Think about those moments when circumstances seem to go wrong, because sometimes those are the exact moments where the next great breakthrough might just be born.